Until a few weeks ago, this man held a key role in Donald Trump's administration. But General Keith Kellogg has not always seen eye to eye with his colleagues.
There's always going to be disagreements in the administration.
He was the president's special envoy to Ukraine and was far more sympathetic to Kyiv than some others in the White House. You felt that your voice was being drowned out by others?
Well, I think there's frustration at any level.
At times, his admiration for President Zelensky put him at odds with President Trump.
Zelensky is a hard nut. I mean, he's a tough son of a bitch.
That comment about him being an embattled and courageous leader really infuriated President Trump.
Yes, it did.
Now, having left the White House, he tells us how he thinks the future of this war will play out. Ukraine can count on President Trump to keep backing them?
Well, I would assume he would. I mean, that's something you have to ask with President Trump.
Why did you leave the job? Was it out of a degree of frustration, or were you compelled to leave by the president, or is there another reason?
No, I wasn't compelled by the president at all. In fact, I told him a month ago that with Marker was that it was time for me to go do something different. I thought this would be done, meaning Ukraine, Russia, in a short period of time. It was over a year. I gave him a year time. I said, I want to go do something else different. I said I didn't see right now an end state to Ukraine and Russia, primarily because of Putin. And I think it was just time for me to move on and do something different and give the president an opportunity to go a different way if he wanted to. So it's up to him to do so. It's, he is the president of the United States. It's his call. And, you respond to the way he does business. And you respond to the way he thinks. And it's just time to move on.
There's been quite a bit of reporting about sort of internal disagreements within the administration about the best approach to Ukraine and solving the conflict with, J.D. Vance, for example, and Pete Hegseth, supposedly taking a bit more of a hardline approach towards Ukraine and towards Zelensky and the supply of weapons. Is that accurate?
Well, I think, there's always going to be disagreements in the administration. You're always going to have people on one side, some people on the other side. That's normal and that's expected out there. And having a presence there and giving viewpoints to both. And I think a good advisor will give them both sides. He'll give them the left side, the right side. You'll have advocates, very passionate advocates for one side, very passionate advocates for the other side. And I think I'm not surprised by it. I mean, there are people will say to me, well, you've got to push your position. No, I just have to give advice. This is my recommendation. This is where I thought we should go. And it's up to the President of the United States to make the call where he wants to go, what he wants to do. He's the president, not me. And he got the electoral college votes, not me. And he's a pretty smart guy.
And but was there a degree of frustration sometimes that you felt that your voice was being drowned out by others?
Well, I think there's frustration at any level. I mean, you just can't, you can't internalize it. You have to accept the fact that's the way it is. I mean, that's the way it is. I've said repeatedly, I'm not the president. He's the president. He makes the call. He makes the call of who he wants around him. He makes the call of the decisions he's going to make, the kind of input he gives. And so I think if you get frustrated by it, internally you can be frustrated, but nobody cares about that. It's all up to the President of the United States. So no, it's, I realized there were various voices in the administration on how to work with Russia, how to work with Ukraine. I had the advantage of knowing the Ukrainians better than anybody else in the administration. The fact is I traveled to Kyiv more than anybody else in the administration, so I kind of knew them really well. So it didn't surprise me at all.
So there were disagreements. There's some reporting suggesting a much more pro-Russian point of view being pushed, by people like Steve Witkoff.
Well, but that's it's true because he knows Kirill Dmitriev, and he knew who the Russians were, and their viewpoint of should you be strong on Russia, should you be strong on Ukraine, where's the balance between it, and the president makes that call. So I know Steve Witkoff, and we get along well.
I mean, a lot of people in the UK feel that we never hear President Trump criticizing Putin. You get the odd kind of, I'm not happy with him, but there doesn't seem to be much in the way of follow through with hard deadlines or sanctions or kind of any kind of follow through on what he should actually do, actions that he should take. Is that a fair criticism?
Well, I think it's a criticism. I don't know if it's fair, because he's done a lot. I mean, I have to go back when I look at this, looking at Ukraine, and look what a previous administration has done, and what this administration has done. You know, for example, Biden never even talked to Putin. At least he talks to Putin. When you think of what he's been able to do, he's done a lot. He put sanctions on him. Russia's not winning this fight. I mean,
but he hasn't forced them to make concessions about their maximalist demands. I mean, Russia is essentially still got the same position it had at the beginning of the war, which is it wants all of the Donbass and it wants Ukraine to become a vassal state, and it hasn't really resolved from that.
Well, but that's his call. I mean, that's his president. If he's the president, not me. He makes those decisions, not me. He gets the input from people, his advisors, and he makes those calls to do it.
Did you tell him he should be tougher with the Russians?
Well, I won't tell you what I told the president. The fact is, I think it's been fairly well reported what people have advised him to do, and we'll leave it at that.
There was a suggestion from Fiona Hill, who used to be, as you know, in the first administration, an advisor on Russia, who said that the Russians were pushing this idea of a kind of a grand bargain where they would withdraw their influence from Venezuela in return for America not supporting Ukraine. Yeah. Do you think that's now coming to pass?
Well, I think, as a student of history, when you look at it, I thought that maybe we're going back to spheres of influence, which we were...
The Monroe Doctrine.
So you said, okay, this is your area, this is your area, this is your area. Maybe this is a new way of looking at things, how it's going to be. I don't know. But it's clearly with Russia, there are some malevolent actors out there. You have North Korea, you have China, you have what's left of Iran, and that's falling apart, and you have Russia. Now, and in the past, we didn't allow those four to come together. We kept them kind of separated. And now they're come together. Now the point is to kind of not break them apart, but move some separation, that you don't have to worry about them anymore, and you get to a point where you've separated North Korea, you've separated China, you've separated Iran from Russia, and keep them isolated. I think that's what we're going back to.
But Fiona Hill's warning does feel like it's coming true now.
I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that's going to happen at all. I think for the long-term stability of the world, that's probably, you put yourself in a dangerous position. I don't think we should give support to the Russians' grand designs. And I think you're asking for I believe if you do that, you're asking to accept the fragmentation of NATO. And I don't think you want to be there.
And is that a risk, you think?
Sure it is. Of course it's a risk. And you just have to assume that there's a risk there, and what are you going to do with it? But when it comes to risk, I think you have to have a tolerance for risk. I'm not sure. There are some people that I don't believe have that tolerance.
Well, I mean, is the president aware of the risks for the future of NATO? Is he concerned?
He's got good advisors. I'm sure.
But what does he think?
I don't know what he thinks. I'm pretty sure the concern is there, and he's been told about that. Does he? But that in the grand bargain, the grand scheme of things, with Marco Rubio, both being the Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, you have Vice President Vance. And you have the president out there, and they'll make that call.
In terms of sort of Vladimir Putin's intentions, I mean, President Trump has said Putin wants Ukraine to succeed. Do you think that Putin wants Ukraine to succeed?
No, I don't. I think Putin, as a former KGB officer, and I don't think they ever outlive their roots. I think he's got a goal in mind, and what we want in the West is not necessarily what he wants. And I think I don't think Putin wants Ukraine to succeed at all.
So why do you think President Trump said that?
I don't know. I'd have to ask.
Do you think he is naive about?
No. There's one thing Trump is not. Is naive. Is that I think it's part of negotiations, part of thinking out loud, and trying to keep Russia in the box. We've got the Ukrainians in the box, trying to get the Russians in the box as well.
What do you think Russia's long-term aims are?
Well, I'm an old Cold War warrior in the sense I still don't have a lot of trust in what the Russians want or don't want. I don't think you outlive your roots and who he is, and I think he would like to rebuild his empire.
And the empire would include Ukraine?
Yes.
And when you made that point to President Trump, what was his reaction?
I'm not going to say what he's going to say. But I think there are people who will say the same thing. There's your risk. Your risk is, what does it look like? You know, I think you have to say, what does this look like, not in a year, but what does this look like in 3, 4, 5 years down the line?
Do you think the war is going to be ended this year?
Well, I would hope it would be. I mean, and I say this because I've been to Ukraine. They're taking a terrible punishment, and the Russians are as well. But you look at the people, and their resiliency is amazing to me. I've been to Kharkiv and Izium and places like that, and their ability to withstand the pressures is enormous. It goes back. I think of when the parallel of this is written. This looks so much like the Blitz of 1940, is what the Russians are doing right now, in the sense of what it's doing to a nation. People forget how big Ukraine's a huge country, and there are people who have said, and I think Fiona's one of them, that without Ukraine, Russia is a regional power. With Ukraine, they are a global power, just toward the expansion. And then the question is, well, where does it go next? That's a good question. I don't know.
There are talks in Paris today on Ukraine involving many NATO countries. What are your hopes for those talks, and what are your fears?
Well, I think now they're talking about security guarantees, and those security guarantees are very hard. We brought those forth. We meaning the team I had, said this is what they're looking for, this is what the Ukrainians are looking for. And I find it hard to believe, I hope they would, but Russia will accept all of those. And coalition of the willing, the amount of troops on the ground, the kind of troops on the ground, nationalities of troops on the ground, that's your sticking point.
Because it feels like the Ukrainians have made compromises or are willing to make some compromises. The Russians are not.
Well, the Russians, now, because you have to separate Russians from Putin.
Okay, Putin.
And Putin doesn't believe he's losing. He is. He's not winning the war. If he was winning the war, he'd be in Kyiv. If he was winning the war, he'd be on the western part of the Dnieper River. If he was winning the war, he'd be in Odessa. None of that has worked. I mean, he's been fighting a war 4 years in war. I mean, when you think about it, put yourself in position of when the Allies came across in Normandy. A year later, the war was over. And they've been doing this for 4 years. So he just has to understand he's not going to get what he wants.
And Ukraine can count on President Trump to keep backing them?
Well, I would assume he would. I mean, that's something you have to ask with President Trump. President Trump is the president. He makes the call to do it.
But for many in the West, that's quite an extraordinary state of affairs that it's not an automatic yes. It's up to President Trump. I mean, any other president in the past, it would have been an automatic guarantee that they would back Ukraine.
But here's where people make a mistake. That's not true. I mean, Trump is a unique individual. And when you look at when I look at President Biden, his criticism of President Biden, we're starting on his. This is not Trump's war. This is Biden's war. And he made all those comments. His comment to Putin was, don't. Well, that isn't an action plan. I criticize it was a bumper sticker. And I just don't think in the past presidents have talked about it, but they haven't acted on it.
Do you think President Zelensky can sell a deal to the Ukrainian people?
Great question. I believe with security guarantees he can do it. And but when I've talked to Stefanchuk, who leads the Rada, which is their parliament, they've got a unicameral parliament. He's got some legal restrictions. When he makes that comment, people go, "Oh, that's not, I've got to worry about our Constitution." Oh, it's okay. No, it's in their Constitution. To give up land, they've got to do a referendum in the country. That's by law.
So you think he could get that over the line if it came to it?
With security guarantees, I do.
And those territorial surrenders would be in law or just de facto?
It'd be in law.
So they would enshrine the surrender of some territory to Russia?
Well, no, because the United States has a doctrine goes back to the 40s. It's called the Wells Doctrine. And that was that it applied primarily to the Baltics, that any land seized by aggression would not be honored and recognized. And so it'd be de facto, not de jure. And then if they did that, that would be de jure, but that's up to them to do so. I don't think they've got the horsepower to do it, meaning I don't think the people of Ukraine will accept that.
But de facto, possibly, with a view that one day.
Oh yeah, de facto, yes.
So the main stumbling block, if they can get this over the line to the Ukrainian people, is Russia accepting security guarantees.
That's the key.
That's the stumbling block.
That's the stumbling block.
And can we ever get past that stumbling block? Can Putin be made to
I don't know.
agree?
I don't know if Putin keeps believing that he's winning. I don't think so. And you think that we have to keep telling him you're not going to win. We have to be very positive, saying you are not winning this fight. Okay, so it's like, why don't you take what you've got right now, go home, call it a day. But he's insistent upon, the four oblasts, which are, you got Luhansk, you got Donetsk, you got Zaporizhzhia and Kherson, putting Crimea aside. He believes that he's winning that fight. He really isn't.
Has that message been delivered bluntly enough by Steve Witkoff?
I know the president has heard that message. I know.
That wasn't quite the question. The president heard the message. Is it being delivered to Putin?
I believe Steve Witkoff has delivered that message. But does Putin accept that? I don't think so.
So that's quite a pessimistic assessment then of where we are. This war grinds on.
Yeah, Putin has to realize he's not going to get what he wants. Putin believes that over time they're going to be able to get to all of where he wants his Donetsk, the Donbass region. And when you look at the ground, they've got the fortified cities, the fortified belts. I don't think he can get there. He does not have the manpower or the depth of forces to do that.
And do you think Ukraine can count on America to keep the weapons supply going? And that's never been in doubt, because there were questions about some 155 million shells being paused.
What's happened is people have to realize that, and I don't want to bore you with the depth of it, but when we were in the height of the Cold War, we had a strategy, America did, of we could fight 2.5 wars. One in the Pacific, one in the Atlantic region, and a contingency, that was your 0.5. As a result of the Cold War ending, we cut that from 2.5 to 1. And because of that, our stockpiles were drawn down. And so what you look at is said, well, we don't want to totally draw down our stockpiles. And it's part of that is the defense industrial base of the United States. When we didn't have, let's use 155 artillery factories that would make 155 artillery rounds, we had to reconstitute. We had to build a new factory. So it's one of the acceptance.
But as a general, as a former Ukraine envoy, you think that America will guarantee that weapons pipeline?
That is up. Do I believe that? Me? Yeah, I think that's going to be there. And I think it's up to President Trump, and I think he'll do it. But that's his call. Nobody else's call but his.
And do you believe that ultimately President Putin is going to have to climb down and accept?
The only way this war is going to end is him climbing down. The Ukrainians are in the box. We've got the Ukrainians where we want them to be. We have to get the Russians to be there also.
And does President Trump understand that?
Well, I don't know if that's one of the questions you have to ask him. The fact is that it's been relayed. This is where they're at. This is where Ukraine's at. This is what the United States is at. And Marco Rubio has been very clear as when you look at our global reach, you can only reach a point where you can only be stretched so far. And we've spent a lot of time working on Ukraine and on Russia. But it goes back to what I said earlier. I think you're looking at a new way of looking how geostrategically the world is. And that's the spheres of influence. You kind of say, okay, this is your area, this is our area. And it hasn't been said yet, but it's almost, you think when you look historically, that's where they're going.
Where does that leave the sort of international legal order?
That's the great question. I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. I think that's a question that has to be asked and looked at, and that's the reason I said this is not, so geostrategically, this is not a one-year thing. This is 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Next administration, this is what you're going to inherit. And I think that's a question that has yet to be answered.
You've left now. When you look back on your time in this job, what regrets do you have?
The biggest regret is we haven't solved this. And after a year, I was convinced we were going to get there in 6 months. Absolutely convinced. But that was the mistake I made is that you assume you're dealing with rational actors. And I think long term, we have one of the actors that's not rational.
Vladimir Putin.
Correct. I don't think he's being told a straight story. I just don't. In any organization, you always have people, holding back what they say. And I think you can say the same thing about him. That with Putin, is he getting the right advice? Is somebody telling him this? And I think it's a misread.
What are you most proud of?
The fact is that we have kept the Ukrainians in the box. That the Ukrainians are aware, they know what's happening. We've kept good relations with them. Zelensky is a hard nut. I mean, he's a tough son of a bitch. And getting there, and I remember telling President Trump at one time that, sir, he's a lot like you. And it was one of those, oh? I said, and I'm not talking about stature, Taiwan, but he's stubborn. He has his opinion. He's unafraid to say that. He knows how to use media. And I made a comment, and I took some criticism for at the time, that I said he was an embattled and courageous leader. And I said people within the administration, we in the United States have not seen a leader like him since Abraham Lincoln. And what I mean by that is that nobody's had to fight an existential fight on their home soil like he has, survival of his nation at stake like he has, and we should accept that. We should understand where he comes from. He's protecting Ukraine. And accept we may not like necessarily what he does or what he says, but it's a fact.
I've got to ask you, I mean, when you said he's like you, he's stubborn and knows how to use the
it's
media,
like
what did President Trump say?
I mean, well, I'll put it, just leave it at that. Because it was, I don't think he believes that, but I do, because I've seen both of them in action, and I've talked to Zelensky, and Zelensky is very opinionated about what he wants and what he wants to do, and again, he's somebody that's fighting for his nation.
And I read that comment about him being an embattled and courageous leader really infuriated President Trump.
Yes, it did.
How did he convey that to you?
He didn't agree with it.
Was there a heated exchange between you?
No, there was not. You know, I'd be very honest. I love President Trump. I love the way he does things and talks about it. But I also understand sometimes you may get mad. Okay, and just let it go with that.
He got mad with you about that?
Well, I don't think he was necessarily pleased about what I said, and because I said that in a Twitter account.
But that had nothing to do with you leaving?
No, not at all.
And you leave on good terms with the president?
Yes.
Why don't you think President Trump sees President Putin as the spoiler to a peace deal?
I think he does. I think he's made some comments about him. I think he thinks he's everything. But I think President Trump relies a lot on his personality. He's talking to a leader. And I think we're trying to get Putin to a position where he kind of says, well, this is all I'm going to get. It's time to quit, go home. I think Trump would like to do that. I would like to do that. I think that's the solution. He's not going to take Ukraine. He is not, I mean, when you look at what Putin's been doing, when you look at people think like I do, this grand scale of warfare, they move in meters. They don't move in miles. And they move by bicycle or cars. I mean, it's an invasion that's basically petered out. But, you know, Putin doesn't agree with that.
I think your daughter referred to this war, and she is very involved with Ukraine. She referred to this war as the biggest battle between good and evil for her generation. Yeah. I think she said ever, but would you agree that this is a battle between good and evil?
Well, she's my daughter, of course I agree with her. Yeah, I think the fact is there's a moral aspect to this war that I'm not sure is really well understood.
Would you describe President Putin as evil?
As
evil?
No, he's being Russian. When you look at it, you can't put characterizations on people that'll get, it's like inflammatory. He's a leader of Russia. He knows what he wants. He views it differently than I view it. And I think we just have to make sure that his view is wrong. It's not going to be there.
How would you advise the British Prime Minister to deal with Donald Trump?
I don't give advices to foreign leaders like Starmer or Merz or Macron or Georgia Meloni. But I think just keep the dialogue open. I would say keep pushing your viewpoint, keep talking to him about it, and as long as you keep the dialogue open, I think that's good. President Trump's an unusual individual. He will answer the phone at 3 o'clock in the morning regardless of who's talking to him. And I think that the foreign leaders accept that, and I think they have to stand their ground, what they want, and make sure he understands their viewpoint is. That's all.
And not to be afraid to speak truth to power.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you look at the Prime Minister of the UK, or you look at the Chancellor of Germany, Merz, I know, speaks his mind, and I would just tell him, say what you feel. You're the leader of a country. This is where you expect to be. Let it go with that.